Hello, welcome to SkepVet TV. I'm Dr. Brendan McKenzie and I'm the SkepVet. I feel like I've been a little bit neglectful of cats in these videos so far, though I've mentioned them in a few places. So I want to do a video specifically looking at an issue that's of concern to cat owners. This is a subject that comes up often when I talk to cat owners in the clinic, and it's something that you'll read a lot of opinions about online as well. The question is, what about carbohydrates in cat diets? Are carbohydrates bad for cats? And are commercial diets, especially dry cat foods, full of carbohydrates, and does that make them dangerous for cats? There are three what we call macronutrients, three types of nutrients that make up the overwhelming majority of the food we eat: fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. And none of them are good or bad in and of themselves. None of them are only one type. There are many types of carbohydrates, there are many types of fats, there are different types of proteins, and the health effects of what we eat in terms of macronutrients are really complicated, and we should try to be wary of simplistic ideas about good and bad nutrients. So the same is very much true for cats. The idea that carbohydrates are inherently toxic to cats and bad for them is really oversimplifying the science that we have. Now, one bit of truth that gets used as a way of demonizing carbohydrates in cat diets is the idea that cats are obligate carnivores. This is absolutely true. What is an obligate carnivore? This is an animal that in nature eats essentially other animals, pretty much avoiding plant material as food. And cats in the wild, insofar as there is such a thing, since cats are domesticated but can be feral, eat pretty much other animals. They very seldom eat any meaningful amount of carbohydrates, maybe a little bit in the stomach contents of their prey. Some cats chew on grasses occasionally, so they'll eat a little bit of plant material. But for the most part, they cannot survive on plant material alone. They are obligate carnivores. They are obliged to eat meat. One interesting fact that this leads to is that cats don't actually need carbohydrates in their diets. Unlike humans and dogs, who are omnivores, cats can live a healthy, normal life absolutely free of carbohydrates in their diet, which is kind of unusual. However, the fact that they are obligate carnivores, the fact that they don't need carbohydrates in their diet, does not mean that carbohydrates are dangerous. It does not mean that cats can't use carbohydrates as a nutrient, as a source of nutrition and calories in their diet. Carbohydrates may not be required by cats nutritionally, but this does not mean that they're harmful or dangerous or that they can't provide a nutritional benefit if used in cat food. So what does this mean for the value of carbohydrates in cat diets? Well, there's good solid research evidence showing that cats can in fact digest carbohydrates, that they can use carbohydrates as a source of calories or energy, that some plant foods can provide protein as well as carbohydrates. So when someone tells you the corn in your cat's food is pure sugar, that's completely wrong. The corn used as an ingredient in cat foods may provide some carbohydrates, but these may be simple sugars. They may be complicated or complex carbohydrates, something like fiber. They may also provide protein. There is protein in plant foods, not just in meat. So cats can use both carbohydrates and plant sources or ingredients as a source of nutrition and calories in their food. In fact, it is interesting to note that diets that are low in carbohydrates for cats can actually have negative health consequences. As I mentioned, there are only three macronutrients: carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. So if you remove most of the carbohydrates from a diet, the other macronutrients have to be a higher proportion of that diet. In some cases, low carbohydrate diets for cats have turned out to be very high in fat, and fat is very high in calories. So these low carbohydrate diets can lead to obesity in cats, and that in turn can be a risk factor for other diseases such as diabetes and cancer. So low carbohydrate diets are not necessarily beneficial to your cat. There are situations in which they may be, but once again, it's more complicated than simply saying yes to fats and proteins, no to carbohydrates. So a related issue then is, what about dry cat food? Are dry cat food diets nothing but sugar? Are they pure high carbohydrate diets that are dangerous for your cat? No. The bottom line is no. This is wrong in two ways. One, these diets are not simply sugars. These diets contain proteins and fats and complex carbohydrates. They may contain some simple carbohydrates or sugars as well, but it's been well demonstrated, again, through research in cats, that it is not necessarily bad to feed carbohydrates to cats. And in fact, Feeding carbohydrates, even feeding simple sugars, does not necessarily raise the blood glucose level of cats or put them at risk for diabetes. Some studies have linked dry diets to an increased risk of diabetes, but other studies have actually found dry diets have no effect on diabetes risk, and some have even found that dry diets are protective and cats eating canned food are more likely to become diabetic. So why is the research all over the place here? Well, the answer is that it's not simply the form of the diet that matters. A dry versus a canned or fresh diet is not the only variable when it comes to the nutritional impact on health. Some dry diets may be better for cats with diabetes or obesity. Some may be worse for cats with diabetes or obesity. It depends on the ingredients and the nutrition in those diets. What is the level of fats and proteins, complex and simple carbohydrates? What is the calorie density? What are the micronutrients? How much is being fed? How is it being fed? Is it always available, or is it being fed in meals? How do the cats eat? How are the cats' genes? What are the cats' weight to begin with? Many, many factors affect the influence of diet on health risks. So the idea that dry diets lead to fat cats or that dry diets lead to diabetes is simply not true. The reality is much more complicated, and dry diets may be either a risk factor or even a protective factor for these diseases, depending on how they're formulated and how they're used. A similar question has been, do dry diets lead to kidney disease in cats? Now, this is not strictly speaking about carbohydrates, but the argument is often made that dry diets are low in moisture and that this creates dehydration in cats and leads to the risk of kidney disease. This has also not been shown to be true through research. Dry diets, interestingly, do not necessarily affect the level of hydration or the degree to which the kidneys work to concentrate the urine and preserve water in the body any more than canned diets do. There are studies which have shown dry diets, in fact, lead to more water intake depending on how they're formulated. Overall, I think it's reasonable to feed higher moisture diets to cats who have any signs that they're developing kidney disease. And certainly there is good evidence that diets formulated for cats with kidney failure may be beneficial. I mean, there's no question that those diets help cats with kidney disease. But again, this is a very different thing from saying that kidney disease is caused by dry diets or that the cats who eat dry food are at greater risk. That has not been shown to be true. So one question that comes up if you're concerned about dry diets or about carbohydrates in cat food is, what should they eat instead? One can make an argument that canned cat foods are lower in carbohydrate and higher in moisture than dry diets, and so they might potentially be healthier for cats. However, research hasn't consistently shown this to be true. As I've mentioned, cats have certainly been shown to develop diabetes, obesity, and kidney disease while eating high moisture canned foods. Some opponents of commercial diets will tell you that, in fact, the whole idea of a commercial processed cat food is bad and that you should be feeding something that is closer to the natural diet of cats. I've done a whole video on natural and how meaningless and misleading that word can be. But what is the natural diet for cats? Well, as obligate carnivores, cats for the most part eat prey. They eat animals. And usually small animals, birds, small reptiles, small mammals like rats or mice. Sometimes larger animals. Cats have been shown to hunt rabbits and other things. Cats may scavenge carrion from larger animals as well. So feral cats eat largely a prey diet. This leads fairly naturally to the idea that a whole prey diet might actually be the healthiest diet for cats. As I mentioned in my video on the subject of what is natural, this is a bit misleading. The diet that animals eat in the wild is not the perfect diet designed for their ultimate long-term health. It's simply the diet that's available to them. It's what they can get, not necessarily what they need. One study was actually done looking specifically at the idea that a whole prey diet would be healthier for cats. Cats were fed a diet of ground-up whole rabbit. Now, some people would argue this isn't a natural diet since cats mostly eat small rodents or birds in the wild, but in fact cats have been known to hunt and eat rabbits, so this is a reasonably good approximation of a natural diet. The study actually had to be stopped because cats were developing a fatal heart condition called dilated cardiomyopathy. This is due to the deficiency of an amino acid called taurine in the diet that they were getting. So a whole prey natural diet turned out to be deficient. Now, is it possible that feeding a mixture of different kinds of ground-up whole prey, like lizards and rodents and birds, to cats would be the best, healthiest diet for them long-term? Sure, it's possible. But it's not necessarily a truth we can automatically accept just because it sounds reasonable. We need to have research evidence to see if, in fact, such diets are better for cats. So far, the limited research we have hasn't been very encouraging. Commercial cat foods, both dry and canned, have been formulated over a long period of time through lots and lots of scientific research and trial and error. They are not the perfect diet, absolutely, but nobody yet knows what the perfect diet is, and anyone who tells you they do is simply making that up. Okay? So for the time being, the safest diet for most cats is a balanced commercial diet that has been fed to cats over a long period of time, produced by a company with nutritionists on staff and with a track record for producing healthy foods. If you have cats who have specific needs, such as kidney disease, diabetes, or obesity, you should talk to your veterinarian because there will be changes you want to make in their nutrition to help manage those conditions. But if you're concerned that feeding a dry diet is simply feeding a bowl full of sugar to your cats every day, you can rest assured that this is not true. This is a misconception put out there on the internet by people who do not really understand nutrition or the complexities of veterinary clinical nutrition. I hope this has been helpful. Thanks for watching. See you next time on SkepVet TV.